Everyone's looking at me thinking that I'm different. Everyone's looking at me thinking that I'm living.
Hello? I don't know about you guys, but when I was younger, my parents had this one rule in our house, right? No phones in our rooms. So when you go up at night, you have to plug your phone in and leave it in the living room. And that might have been the best rule my parents ever enforced in our household. But once I got a little bit older and I moved out, that rule became a little bit harder to self-enforce, because when you're in university, you don't really have that luxury. So what started at the opposite side of my room when I moved out quickly worked its way to the bedside table, to then eventually being right beside me as I went to bed, being the last thing I was on. And pretty soon, before I knew it, what had started as something that I never really experienced, which was being on my phone at night, became a nightly habit, to the point that I was on my phone every single night. And that's kind of the life I live right now. I live in a world, I think we all live in a world that's becoming increasingly difficult to unplug for a meaningful amount of time, unless you're in isolation from everyone else. On top of that, I work a full-time job in the tech industry that kind of forces me to be available 24 hours. So that no matter what I'm doing, Yeah, no, I understand. Probably have that to, who needs it, though? Did you try turning it on and turning it off and then turning it on again? No, I'm just kidding. Though, that has happened before. Not to mention that today we live in a world where so much of our relationships live online. Whether it's our friends, our families, our significant others, we rely on the screens in our lives and our digital technology in order to not only survive, but thrive in the world around us. And in some ways, we don't live in a world anymore where we're physical creatures in a digital world. We're more digital creatures in a physical world. But over the past year, I've had a pretty significant realization that really changed my relationship to the technology in my life and ultimately improved it for the better. I got to a point where I was viewing my relationship to technology as very hierarchical, meaning that I was using it to the point that I felt almost enslaved by it, feeling more obliged to use it than really wanting to. I'd find myself at times using my phone for no real reason, or I'd be multitasking and then I'd pick up my phone just to do another thing again for no real reason. Eventually it got to the point where I was opening my phone and closing it without even checking anything, just as a means to fiddle around. And this sort of mindless use of the technology in my life really bothered me. But the problem was I couldn't seem to figure out why it was happening, and more importantly, I couldn't seem to figure out how to break this cycle of mindless use. Eventually it got to a point where it felt like I wasn't living a life, but instead I was watching other people live a life through the screen in front of me, and I was using that as almost a substitute. So, what did I do to break the cycle? I did what I always did. I cut it off. I cut off all the technology that basically made me feel like I was watching other people live and not doing anything with my own life. And I did this all the time. I was caught in this cycle where I'd use technology and then I'd cut it out, only to find myself using it again. And when I did cut it off, something amazing happened. I was living a life exactly like I wanted. I was going out and I was having experiences, traveling to new places, meeting people, and I didn't feel this overriding need to share it. Until I kind of did. Because what I realized was that there was also a lot of benefits to social media and this kind of digital world I lived in which I got to explore and share my ideas and my experiences with people I really loved about, and I could stay in touch with them. And so every time I cut that technology off, I just got stuck in this kind of... Why don't I show you? This sort of inconstant swinging between having social media and technology in my life every day to not having it at all bothered me even more, because it just proved to me that it was kind of a band-aid solution onto this much deeper issue that I didn't really understand. Technology has become such a ubiquitous part of our everyday lives that it's really easy to forget what the devices in our hands are meant to do. You know, the devices in our hands are meant to improve and enhance our ability to live, not become the reason we live. All the devices we own are instruments, and instruments aren't an end unto themselves, but a means. See, the problem I was having with technology in my life wasn't its presence, but the way I elevated its status to become one of the central tenets of my life. I forgot that the devices in my life weren't the end unto themselves, but they existed for me to distill, record, and share my actual life experiences. So, here's a good example. You know, I think a lot of time when we're on Instagram, I hear, and I say this all the time, I talk to my friends about, oh, I hate it because it's so fake. You know, it's only showing the best parts of people's lives. But if you stop and think for a second, I mean, of course it is. Of course it is, because that's exactly what I want from something like Instagram. I don't go on Instagram to look at someone live through their daily lives. I want to see the adventures, the excitement, the happiness, the love, the parts of our lives that are the highest points. And that's really what technology had become to me. It was this kind of addictive high of seeing the best parts of life. But it made complete sense because that's exactly what I want. When I go on Instagram, I don't see my real life. I see the life I wish I could live. The one where every minute is aesthetically beautiful. It's exciting. It's an adventure. And for me to expect that when I go on Instagram I'll see anything else is just dishonest. It's insincere with myself. See, but the insincerity didn't come from the fact that that existed. But it came from the fact that I was putting this expectation back on myself that I could live that life without actually having to get off my couch. And that wasn't true. See, because the beauty of something like Instagram is that it gives you a gateway into what is possible. But then it's incumbent upon you to go up and live that life. We can choose to use the technology in our lives to inspire us, to connect us, to make us better by connecting us or plugging us into the collective unconscious. But I was choosing to use my technology to mooch off that energy instead of actually going out and doing those things. I wasn't digitally fatigued because I was using too much tech, but because I was replacing a meaningful life with the vestige of one, and then blaming the technology I was using that was giving me that very feeling. In fact, I wasn't digitally fatigued at all. I was emotionally fatigued because I wasn't living a life I was proud of living. I think after all these years, I figured out why my parents kept our phones out of our rooms. While it also helped us get a good night's sleep, I think the real motivation was to give us a physical time and space away from everyone else's voices, where we could meditate on our own lives and our own goals. As children, it gave us an opportunity to stretch our minds with books and stories and legends, to find heroes who we could look up to without being told by others who those heroes had to be. In some ways, they gave us the most significant resource of all, which was silence. And in that silence, we had an opportunity to talk to ourselves, find ourselves, understand what inspired us, what goals got us up in the morning. And in that silence was birthed the energy to wake up the next morning and go and live a life that I would be proud of. Thanks, Mom and Dad.